Mr. Brian Pennie.
Dan,
We did it.
finally.
Finally, we put it together. This has been months in the making. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Privilege, really is.
Let's get straight to business, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a lot to talk about today. Can you tell me, in your vast experience, personally and professionally, what is something that most of us do not understand about how our brain works when it comes to what motivates us? What motivates us to take action? What motivates the decisions that we make, how we feel? What's something that you found that a lot of people, they miss or misinterpret or don't really understand?
Yeah, God, I'd be drawing on me lived experience and me academic knowledge with that. And I think one of the biggest things is that people believe that our brains want what's best for us, but they don't. There's part of our brain does, so it's really nuanced, like the newer cortex part of our brain. But fundamentally, the biggest driver of behavior of the brain is around self-preservation. And that older part of the brain, that limbic part of the brain, fundamentally, it wants to avoid pain because it sees it as death, and it wants to chase pleasure because it sees that as self-preservation. And it's really an evolutionary perspective, but the evolutionary drive is so powerful because it's from millions of years. Because only in the blink of an eye has this newer part of the brain, cognitive processes and language come along. Whereas before that was all about self-preservation. So if you find something that's pleasurable, years ago, many years ago, it would have been like fig trees or fruits, and that can help the survival of the species. So that is a good thing. Whereas anything that was a little bit dangerous or hard, let's say, and challenging in some way, that could have been potential death. So our brains are always chasing pleasure and avoiding pain. And in the world we live in today, there's loads of opportunities to chase pleasure. And we all know technology, food, drugs, they're the pleasures we chase, and we avoid potential pain. And what's potential pain I'm talking about here? Going to the gym, having difficult conversations. It doesn't want to do those things. It doesn't want to do the hard things. It wants to do the easy things, get the quick fix. And I think that's fundamentally a massive driver that's unconscious for a lot of people.
Why do you think it's so unconscious? In my experience, there's not just an unconscious element to this, there's an active resistance to acknowledging that there are deeper drivers there. And what I mean by that is a lot of us like to intellectualize this and say that I'm in control of my decisions. I'm a dialed in person. I only do something if I want to do it. And also on the other side, and this is obviously speaking to some of your personal experience, we're quick to cast judgment on people who are victims to their drives, like addicts. A lot of people say, something wrong with that person. I'd never do that. Yeah. That would never be me. I'm not like that. There's something wrong with them, or that's a sickness or an illness. Yeah. And my view has always been, it's probably just a maladaptive response to a pretty normal human behavior, either moving away from pain or seeking pleasure.
Yeah, there's a few elements to that. And I think one really important part is that when we come across some kind of a stressor, some kind of challenge in our life, that newer part of the brain actually shuts down. Like we call this the fight and flight response. And when the fight and flight response kicks in, our bodily systems kick in to either fight or flee. And the brain thinks, right, we don't need to think right now. We just need to get out of dodge or fight this situation. So that part of our brain actually shuts down. But I think when we're thinking of these cognitive processes, like today, we think we're smart and we think we're in control and we think we do the logical things. But when we're under duress, that part of the brain actually shuts down. But I think something that you tapped into there that is really, really important as well. Like you will get people, like let's say we talk about willpower and we make the decisions. We're in control. But we often own our wins. Like if we do something great, we say, oh no, we done that. I done that as a person. I'm in control of that. But then even on a societal level, like we praise football teams, we praise sports teams, and we praise things that people do. And we say fair play to the human being for doing that. But then if something bad happens, we don't want to take blame for that. We nearly blame environmental factors. And it is the environmental factors. It's not the human being. So sometimes we differentiate who sort of it takes agency for for their actions when it's drivers underpinning that and environmental factors that are really playing the bigger role.
Yeah, I think that resistance piece is today, with all the personal development content that's out there and a lot of the conversations around, like, I love the word agency. I love the idea that we have an element of control over what we do, but I think that goes hand in hand with acknowledging our biological drivers. And it's the I don't want to use the word ego, but it is the ego that we seem to have around these biological drivers, that somehow we've managed to control them.
Yeah.
And I actually think we've less control over them than before, because certain elements of society have figured out that there are certain buttons they can press to get us to take certain actions. So we're even more of a slave to those drivers now, because they're not just a circumstance of the natural world. Now, I'm not getting into this whole naturalistic fallacy thing. We should go back and live in the caveman eras.
Yeah.
But I think how our brains worked many, many years ago is not too far away from how our brains work now, but the environment is very different. And there are certain elements of society that have understood that and certain elements that haven't. And the people who don't, in my opinion, are the ones who are led.
Yeah, it's and it does come back to that, like, that evolutionary mismatch, that the bodies that have evolved for us over time are not built for the world we live in today. So there's all these buttons, there's all of these levers that are pulling us in different directions. And again, it could be a certain element where our brains switch off because of a stress response, but we could be just chasing dopamine in terms of another way. And it's really important to think, like, addiction-based behaviors can be very powerful in terms of driving that behavior in an conscious to an extent, unconscious way. We can be conscious of it, but we still do it. Like, how many people know that their phones are not good for them? It's not good to scroll, but they still scroll. And many people know that alcohol or drugs are not good for them, but they still do drugs and alcohol. So there's a level of where we consciously know about it, but we still succumb to these urges, these basic human drives that we have. And I think that's really important, because, like, one fundamental element, it's nearly a principle of psychology that's very powerful, is that behavior that's rewarded is repeated. And this is really important because basically this is a survival mechanism. So if the behavior is rewarded and something good happens, well, that's going to have good consequences for us as a species. If something good happens, we'll do it again. But that was back before we had the world we live in today with drugs, technology, and the amount of junk food that's available to us that isn't actually good for us. But it's rewarded in a way that dopamine is released. And we often talk about dopamine as this pleasure neurotransmitter. It does give us pleasure, but what it's really doing is it's saying, this was good, do it again in the future. So, but dopamine is more about motivation and drive. And these drives, yet we know about them, but is it in our control? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting place to explore for people, because I'm not all about doom and gloom. Like, for me, the more we understand this, the more we can interact in a healthy way with this.
Yeah.
And for example, you mentioned stress there. It's a great example. Jill, my fiance, is a pediatric occupational therapy, and she talks about this stress response for people as well, and how sometimes people are categorized or diagnosed with certain things or conditions or whatever. But if you take one step back and look at their environment, they're not operating in a quote unquote normal way, because their environment is causing massive stress. And it was her that said to me, like, simple things like even recognizing faces can change when you feel stressed. It shuts down certain areas of your brain that allow you to process the information normally, and you view threat in a lot more areas of your life. So that reinforces the stress again. And the world we live in now, if you find threat in work because you're under pressure from your boss, and your boss's face all of a sudden becomes a threat stimulus for you, that stimulates more stress. Then you're in a heightened stress state. Then you might see your co-workers as something that causes more stress. And all of a sudden you're in this loop, and it's all being driven by this environmental response to stress. It's shutting down parts of your brain. So you're not having a normal interface with the world. If I understand that, I can maybe decide to not make so many decisions based on how I feel in certain situations, and go, okay, well, I'm being stressed out by all these things. Maybe I can just step out of this for a minute. Maybe I can take 3 minutes outside the room and calm myself down, and I might not see so many threats everywhere or feel so riled up. Like, people know this stuff, but I think understanding the driver behind it, it's normal, but it's not adaptive. It's not optimal. It's a normal human response that's just being hyper triggered, I suppose.
Yeah.
If I understand that, I can now interface in a different way with the world. So it's not
Yeah.
about me going, oh, this is terrible. The world is terrible for me and I'm going to be so stressed. It's more about, okay, I know that I don't make good decisions when I'm stressed like this.
Yeah.
So maybe what can I do to make a decision under different circumstances?
Yeah.
Maybe take a little bit more time for myself. Maybe don't respond to that email straight away. Maybe don't immediately
Yeah.
tell my partner what I think of her when she gives me a comment or whatever. Maybe just remove the stress, remove the threat, remove the fear, then regulate the nervous system. And then I'll be like, oh, I'll probably have a different thing I want to say here now.
Yeah. And there's something you said that really screamed at me as well, Dan, is like that threats are everywhere. And they really are. And we call it stress. We play these language games, but it's a nervous system response. And there's so many things that can trigger our nervous systems, especially today. There's a lovely model out there, actually. It's around social neuroscience, but it sort of describes a couple of things that can be really triggering the nervous system. And again, shutting down elements of our brain in that nuanced way. And one of them is uncertainty. Like if you, as human beings, like if you are uncertain of what's going to happen, fear, oh my God, what's going to happen? How are we going to survive? Is something dangerous going to happen? So that's triggering for the nervous system. And look at the world today. It's changing so quickly. There is uncertainty everywhere. So that's anxiety inducing, and that can cause problems. Another huge thing that causes problems is lack of fairness. If you see a lack of fairness and a lack of justice in the world, that is massively triggering for the nervous system. You look at the wars going on in the world, you look closer to home, there is unfairness everywhere, a lack of justice everywhere. There's so many problems, community-based problems, social-based problems, and this is triggering for our nervous system as well. So on that macro scale, it's huge with certainty and with justice as well. Another big one is status. Like if your status is diminished, it's triggering for your nervous system. And all of a sudden, like let's say we evolved in tribes eons ago, and there's 250 people in the tribe. That's how we kind of evolved. Well, if you're at the bottom of the ladder and someone's up the top, you're still only 250 paces away. But we're living in cities and with the internet of billions of people, and you see, like, I don't know why Bono's come to mind. Let's say Bono has great status or whatever the status of these people. We're so far away from where we could potentially be that, like, people with money, status games with money, with wealth, the inequalities are huge, and that taps into unfairness and uncertainty as well. So these things compound and combine. So, and there's a lack of autonomy. I suppose we have autonomy as well, but there's a lack of autonomy and a lack of freedom. That can be very triggering for our nervous systems as well. So these multiple factors, that these terms that we talk about are triggering at that biological level, can cause confusion within our bodies, within our brains. We're not thinking straight, and we're more susceptible to these urges and these biological things. And then we've built a world. There's industries out there that are hijacking our brains around us trying to escape and avoid the challenges we're facing internally. And there's just so many lures and temptations. So it's such a dangerous world to be in. It's like swimming around with sharks. Like,
I definitely want to dive into that. I'm not going to go there yet because I'll go way off track here, but definitely want to come back to that. In terms of the knowledge that you've spread, and obviously you're an educator, do you find that when people understand these physiological and evolutionary things a little bit more, you're already answering my question for me, do you find, I'll finish the question for the listener, do you find that it helps them on their journey of interacting or interfacing with this trigger stimulus, or does it make no difference, or does it overwhelm them and make them freak out? You're smiling at me here, Brian. Go on.
Well, what I would say is, right, and it's something you said a while ago there, is it good if we understand that? Understanding it is one thing, right? So we're understanding, and we have a level of understanding of how our brains, how our bodies, and how the world works. There's a difference between understanding and catching it in the moment. So I think self-awareness is the holy grail. It is the catalyst for change. Like, it really is. And I often say, like, it's easy to go to a meditation class or a yoga class and be very aware of your mind, your body sensations. It's not easy, but it's a lot easier than when the pressure's on, when you're seeing injustice, when there's lots of uncertainty, when your partner's screaming at you and the kids are screaming and there's loads of stuff going on. Like, catching that is one thing, or having the knowledge is one thing, but catching it in the moment is an entirely different thing. And what I would say is that most people, even if they have the knowledge, being aware of it in the moment, because awareness is learned, that is really problematic. And there's a line that I sort of live by, like, knowledge is not where the game is played. The game is played in action, and it's the actions that you take. And what I would say to people is, it's nearly right understanding it, but practicing the practices you have, whether it's breath work techniques, whether it's practicing observing, like something that I try to do in my own life. I always have one eye on my inner world. How am I responding emotionally to that? How am I responding psychologically to that? What am I saying to myself about that? And I nearly catch myself, like I call it mindful self-observation, where I'm saying, right, how am I reacting to certain events? And it's the practice of that over time, that you have one eye on the inside of how you are responding to the world. And that's the goal. It's catching those triggering emotional triggers in full flight to make sure they don't trigger other emotional responses and spiral out of control.
There's so much there, right? We're in it now. We're in on the big pain point that I always seem to get to with these type of conversations when it comes to autonomy over how we think, how we feel, how we act, our health. Understanding, I like how you put that. There's layers to this. One of the layers I feel is this understanding. Another layer is self-awareness. I like how you said the word practice there, because you talked about meditation. It's easy to do it in the moment, and not so easy to do it in the practice and not so easy in the moment. But I feel like that's why it's called practice, which you alluded to there, because this is it's a skill you have to develop. And people might be familiar with this idea of the happiness gap. I'm sure there's probably be a psychological or physiological explanation for this as well. But I remember hearing, was it Mo Gaudat, I think is the guy.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Yeah, and he spoke about it. And I remember when he spoke about this idea of the happiness gap, it was a thing I already had in my head but never had a word for. I was like, okay, that's what other people have talked about when it comes to meditation, self-awareness, the distance that you can create between input and reaction, or input and action. And some people have no action, but what I'm talking about specifically is trigger. Something happens, there's a trigger. How much distance can you create between your action and that trigger? Because if there's no distance, it's a reaction. Yeah. And most of our reactions are physiological responses, which are pre-programmed, as you spoke about before. So they're probably not going to be particularly helpful unless there is the old cliche, a lion running at you down the road. Fucking run. Yeah. In most cases, you don't want that massive adrenaline dump if you're in the office and the boss says something. Yeah. If there's an uncomfortable social situation, someone makes a joke. You don't want this overwhelming, because it puts you into the fear response and you can't make good decisions. Yeah. You can probably get up and punch them or run or scream back, which is what most of us do. But if we actually sat and thought about it, in most of the situations that we feel stressed in life, we don't want to react that way, but we end up reacting that way. Yeah. So for me, the idea of this happiness gap is, Brian says something. Can I practice creating space between him saying something, me feeling a thing, and then me acting on that thing? And that's where the power is, I feel. Is that something you kind of think about or work on in the neurological space?
Yeah, big time. There's a lot to unpack there as well with that, right? So straight away, if something happens, and even if you're the Dalai Lama and you have this amazing space around challenges, well, if an animal jumps out at you in the wild, you don't want any space.
Peace and love, brother. Peace and love.
Peace and love, you're dead, you're gone. Yeah. So you want a reflexive reaction. And that's the difference between an acute stressor and chronic stressor. So your acute stress is, like, stress isn't a bad thing. Stress is information. It's data of impending danger. It's built to save you. You have a stress response and you react to it. So I think that is really, really important, that you react to a stressor reflexively. But here's the thing, right? And there's some phenomenal work done on this. I think it's Ledoux, his name is. He was Nobel Prize winning work at one stage, but it was looking at the fear response. And if something happens in our lives that's a fear response, we have two sort of pathways within the brain. One of them is like the quick and dirty road. So the information gets to your amygdala really, really quickly, right? So it's like lights up the amygdala super quick, but the information is dirty because it's so quick. You're not assessing and paying attention and really getting the whole context of everything that's going on, because it has to be really, really quick for self-preservation. But while that's going on, there's a slower, cleaner road going up to the neocortex and appraising the situation, right? What's really going on? It's slower, but it gets more information. So I'll give you an example of this that's often used. Imagine you're walking along in the woods and all of a sudden you see something on the ground. Could be a snake, could be a stick. Quick and dirty road, stress response, jump back reflexively. But in the meantime, it's going up and it's taking in all the information. It's brown, it's this, that, and the other. It says, oh no, it's only a stick, calm down. Now there, the body goes back into balance, back into homeostasis. It's only a stick. And someone that would say, let's say, well, in inverted commas, will just walk on and enjoy the rest of the walk. But somebody, let's say, that struggled with trauma or challenges in their life, so that could have been a snake. The next one could be a snake. Oh my God. And they fuel that and they go into a chronic stress mode. So the first one was an acute stressor, back into balance. Animals do this. Like zebras don't go off worrying about the next lion attack after they get a near attack.
Is that the why zebras don't get ulcers?
Yeah, it's that, you know. So they haven't got language, they haven't got that time-based brain that thinks about that stuff. So we do. So that's really the big challenge that we face around the autonomy that we have over decisions. That's all this reflexive stuff going on, but we have got this ability to appraise that information.
I can see how this is how it gets really nuanced with human beings, because you mentioned trauma there and environment and all these things in previous experience. But in my experience talking to people and myself, you can also layer on top of that the narratives that we build for ourselves and the perceptions. Even if I don't have massive trauma, I have all of this other input, and you mentioned the news cycle and all these things going on in the world that I now have exposure to, and these things could also happen and are happening right now and might not have happened to me in the past, but could happen to me in the future. So there could be a new snake that looks exactly like a stick, and because I saw it on Instagram, and you've, as well as your own lived experience in trauma. There's the fire alarm. I don't believe this is the first time that's ever happened.
Is it serious?
You stay there, I'll check it out.
Bring that in. Was that a stress response, Dan?
Hold on, let me take 2 seconds before we burn to death here. I'm okay. I'll go check out.
Now we'll appraise the situation.
That's a good example.
Yeah, it was.
We're back. Ladies and gentlemen, we didn't burn to death. We're fine. We're good. I was going to send to Brian that I went out, the alarm went off, and then went off a second time. We still hadn't moved. And then I went outside and people were opening the door saying, I waited for the third alarm really, because there's never really a fire. So it's the opposite of the fear responses in the building here anyway.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Do you know what, Dan, that brings me back to? It's one of my favourite lines of one of the most, one of the biggest thinkers, best thinkers out there. But it's from the book Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful line. It says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your chance to choose your response, and there lies your growth and your freedom. So it is your ability. There will be challenges in life, but if you, and it's back to the trauma piece, if you've experienced challenges and especially traumatic events in your life, you will become hypersensitive, hyper vigilant to future threats. So even like small things, like somebody with a fire alarm going off, there we go again, with a fire alarm going off, you're like hyper vigilant and you're always on the lookout for that threats, and that just compounds over time. So it's really, really problematic.
Yeah, I can 100% can see that. It's so interesting from all these different backgrounds and cultures, because what came up for me, that I love that Viktor Frankl quote, but
It's lovely.
I often bring up the Buddhist 2 arrows as well. The first arrow is pain, the second arrow is suffering.
The 2 darts, I call it, the arrows. Yeah. I love it.
This is a hard thing to talk about in some contexts, because I don't want to over contextualize it, but I'm always really, really conscious that there's potentially people listening who've had a much more challenging life than me.
Yeah.
And your previous story, I didn't go through a challenge like that, but you're well positioned to speak to this.
Yeah.
And to listen to someone talk about the two, suffering is optional. It's sometimes a challenging thing for people to hear, but I actually think it's really empowering when you acknowledge that, there's things that you cannot control. A lot of things you can't control, really. What's going to happen to you or around you, or what environment you grow up in. And some of us are much more fortunate than others in terms of our environment. Fully acknowledge that. But Viktor Frankl was in a fucking concentration camp. I can't get past that point. He was in one of the worst environments known to humankind.
Yeah.
And he still thinks this?
He still thinks this. His family had been killed. He was starved, beaten. The worst of human atrocities were being done to Viktor Frankl, but he stayed the master of his own inner world. And speaking to my own experiences, Dan, so there was, for me in the past, there was a challenge, there was no space, there was just a reaction, which was drug taking, heroin, because I couldn't cope with anxiety. And that came from traumas that I experienced as well. But I've done a lot of work through meditation, through breath work. I've created a space between challenges in my life and my emotional response to it. And I had a profound learning experience. It was in 2017. So we as a family, we got deported from Canada when I was 5 years of age. My mum and dad got deported. It was my dad actually that got deported, but we all got kicked out of the country. Police escorts, very traumatic for my mum and dad. I was only 5 years of age, so it wasn't that big a deal. But I was going back over to Canada when I was in 2017. I'd done a lot of work on myself. It was one of the first biggest talks I ever done. It was for Trinity College about my master's research on emotion regulation and self-awareness, the essence of what we're talking about here. And when I got over to Canada, they were kicking me out of the country because they had me on the list for being deported as a 5-year-old kid. And I remember wanting to go into this rage. I could feel the anger and the anxiety, the guilt. I was letting Trinity down. They paid a lot of money for me to go over. I was going to be meeting me professor Rob, and a big talk. I'd prepared so well for it, but now they were kicking me home. And I remember in Montreal and the woman saying to me, because I caught the emotional hijacking in full flight, and I says, right, this is outside of my control. First starts in life are inevitable. Pain, second darts is optional, where I have a choice. I actually do have a choice over freaking out here. I don't have to get angry. I don't have to show rage to this woman who it's not her fault anyway. So I caught that. I took a breath and I calmed down and I says, right. And I just started having a conversation where I'm having a chat, and she was quite taken aback. She was like, can I ask you why you're so relaxed? We don't usually get this with people when we're telling them they're getting deported and getting kicked out of the country on the next plane. And I says, look, my mum and dad had alcohol issues. We got deported out of the country. I'm sure that's why I'm getting kicked out. She hadn't told me that yet. I ended up with addiction issues, but I have since found recovery. I'm actually over here to talk about emotion regulation, addiction, and mindful self-awareness. I wouldn't be walking me talk if I was over here in
losing the
rag.
Airport, yeah.
Do you know what she done? She went over and had a chat with a work colleague, came back, and she says, you know what? We're going to break the law for you. Yeah, you can get in for the weekend. And they let me in. So by holding space between that challenge, and life is full of inevitable challenges, and my emotional reaction to it, it changed that event. That was the first big talk I done. Public speaking is one of my favorite things in my world now. That could have been a pivotal moment in my life, but it was a profound learning experience, because what I learned was that your emotional reaction to life's challenges will determine your success both professionally and personally in your life. It was huge for me. So that's the power of that there in an example, you know?
Yeah, that's so powerful. Can I guess you just see me back into the middle there? I think
Yeah.
you were afraid of the fire there, so you shifted over. That's something that has been banging around in my head specifically since I started a business. And I got the overwhelming impression, just for a bit of context, I have exposure to a lot of people who run their own projects, businesses, or like podcast or content, whatever it is. A lot of people, hundreds of people every year. I meet them, I sit with them, I talk to them just through what I do. And I got the overwhelming impression that this stat about businesses that fail, startups that fail, was to do directly with people's capacity to manage their emotional state. Because I found that all of the results, all of the occurrences in my business at the start were directly tied to how I felt. If I got stressed and worked up and emotional, I'd pull everything down on top of myself, and I create this self-fulfilling prophecy. So it wasn't linked with the marketing or the service or the anything that I did necessarily. But on the other side, I found that my ability to stay the course through times of emotional difficulty, when I felt stressed or overwhelmed, to be able to still do the thing despite the emotion, even if I wasn't able to necessarily regulate the emotion, if I didn't make decisions based on how I felt specifically,
Fear.
I just kept going.
Yeah.
And if I just kept going, things happened. That just happened because you managed the emotion.
Yeah.
And you didn't plan this. You didn't do this to manipulate her. You didn't do this knowing that you were going to have a positive outcome in the situation. You just did it because you associated managing emotional response with more positive outcomes in general for you. And all of a sudden, it's a bigger positive outcome than you could ever think. So I think I have this theory around business that most businesses don't fail in the first 5 years, whatever it is, because of like the traditional reasons people might think, like funding issues, or we had no capital, or it's people's ability to manage the emotions of a really stressful environment, because you're stressed all the time when you run a business.
Yeah.
So the ability to just constantly make better decisions that aren't emotion based, I think is the key. And you've just basically echoed that.
Yeah, and I think the word as well is inevitable. Like, there will be challenges. You will be afraid. Like, there is a lot on the line. But it's like, the advice you get back from really successful entrepreneurs and people who've done well in life, and so much of it pulls back to this: don't give up, perseverance, hard work, don't give up. But what they're really saying is, despite the emotional challenges, you still keep going.
Yeah.
So it's managing your fear, and not even managing it all zen. Sometimes you have to push through it. And for not everyone, it's challenging for some people. It's different for some people, depending on the traumas and where they are in life and different things. It is nuanced. But that's what determines the success. I totally agree with that.
Mm.
And the funny thing is, with that challenge I had in Canada, I actually turned that into a keynote talk. It's one of my most popular keynote talks. It's how to create space
No way.
between the challenge and your emotional reaction to it. So I use that. And my fundamental belief is like that we need to move beyond resilience. And that means don't be resilient and just put up with it. It's use the challenges as the fuel to learn and grow, because that's where the good stuff is.
Brian, there's so much gold every time. I can't even write this stuff down fast enough. That's something I heard last year, which I found fascinating, is that sometimes it's actually, we are so resilient as human beings. So resilient. There's situations people are in right now that just seem like I would absolutely implode on day one, but the chances are I'd probably be okay because human beings do really well to adapt. But that can be a negative thing as well, this maladaptation. You can become so adapted to a really poor situation and keep pushing through. It doesn't actually serve you necessarily.
Yeah.
It's very, well, I use the word admirable. It's really impressive that human beings can do that, but it doesn't necessarily serve you as well, which is where this reflective piece is so important. It's not enough to just be emotionally resilient and take all of this all the time, constantly for the rest of your life, because that's not necessarily going to lead you to a peaceful life. It's great to be able to manage stress, but also if you're reflecting on things and your life causes you stress all the time, you can probably make other decisions there as well. So even that part of the conversation is nuanced. But sometimes it can actually be it can be a disadvantage how resilient we are. So it's not just, like you said, all about being resilient.
Yeah.
Because hold on,
It's a dangerous thing in a
why
way.
are you just constantly in the situation all the time?
Yeah.
You have to be resilient all the time. Like, would you not prefer to not have to do this all the time?
What kind of a life? I'm so resilient. I'm fighting fires every single day, all my life.
Walking into burning buildings every single day. Not even fighting fire. You're actively walking into the burning building going, I can take it.
Getting burned, but I'm still here.
Yeah. And that's the kind of, and all these words toxic, I don't like to throw it around, but that's the kind of unhelpful side of the personal development sphere, is just resilience at all costs.
Yeah.
I like resilience, the idea of physical and mental and emotional resilience where it's appropriate.
Yeah. But learn. Adjust, pivot.
Yeah. Which brings me to another question that people will push back on a little bit with this type of topic. It's, oh, well, good for you, Brian. You had this experience and learned these skills. Oh, well, good for you, Dan. Your life is great and you get to sit and have these conversations on a fucking Wednesday with, like, but what about me? And again, I go back to Victor. Good old Victor, he's always there in my corner. I think it's like we said earlier on, I believe this is something that can be practiced. I think it can be something that can be nurtured. Sometimes a situation forces your hand a little bit where it's do or die. It's make a decision and change your life. And sometimes for a lot of us, we don't have those really obvious, clear decisions. I'm not saying it was an advantage that you had addiction for the time that you did, but there's lessons that you can learn there that might be a little bit less obvious for me to learn.
Yeah.
But I can probably find 50 ways in my life where I could practice this particular skill, because the chances of me going to the airport and getting refused and losing my shit are much higher than you. But I could practice that and I could become better at doing that. And I think most of us, not all of us, but most of us can.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, like, I was that much away from freaking out. It was a close call. But what that gave me was an insight. Oh, wow, that was life-changing and I was so close to messing up. So I says, right, I'm going to double down on this. And I described, like, with the trauma I experienced in my life, and I had no resilience, never mind beyond resilience. I had nothing. I collapsed under the face of adversity in my earlier life. I described my brain. I have a scan of my brain when I was in detox, and it was a finely tuned anxiety machine. I got a scan of my brain 7-8 years later, and my brain had changed over time. I have a great relationship with anxiety today. So what I'm saying is we can change our relationship with these things, but we can build them as skills, and not just skills. These skills can be seen in our brain. We can become more focused, more attentive. Happiness is a skill. Regulating your emotions, these are a skill. And not only are they behaviors, you can see these things in your brain through neuroplasticity. Wherever you rest your mind upon, your brain will take that shape. But the challenge is staying the course. My really intense experience, I suppose, gave me a shift in perspective that, in a bizarre way, 15 years of heroin addiction and a lot of hardship, but it gave me an advantage because it was an extreme situation that set me on a different path. But for some people, like, there's a great line in addiction circles that when you're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, that's when you change. But for some people, it's the grind. It's not hard enough to force them to change. You know that way? It has to get so painful that you're forced into change. So where I suppose the change, because we're comfortable in our shit sometimes, you know, that way. So it has to get so deep or so hard that you're forced into it. And that's what happened to me, and that's what rock bottom can be for some people. So that's where the reflection piece comes in, and just to realise, to understand it, right, I need to do things differently. There's another way of doing this, but then how do we stay the course? That's the hard part.
I'm sure any regular listeners to my podcast are laughing now because they're saying Brian's walking right into his trap here. I probably bring this up in every single podcast I talk about. We've spoken about this before, this idea of the region beta paradox. This idea that a lot of us exist in a space that's not optimal, but it's not bad enough to force us to change. And I came across this in the health sphere. Everyone knows this. I call it the heart attack. Now I call it, like, in this kind of context, it'd be the emotional heart attack. There needs to be something, in my experience in the health sphere, there always needed to be something bad enough that frightened somebody into being able to make a fundamental change to their health. So someone has a heart attack. Up until that point, they would really struggle to change any element of their life that was contributing to the heart attack, whether it was nutrition or stress management or exercise, whatever it is. It was a real struggle. And we know all the reasons why it's a struggle: habit development, pathways, environment, trauma, etc. But the only effective method I saw for most people was to have something really bad happen. And that, for me, then the visual I used, they fell out of that region beta. And it was now bad enough they had to make a decision. The other example I use is you work a job you don't particularly enjoy. Your boss is a bit of a bollocks. You're just stressed all the time. But it's just not bad enough. You'd be almost better off. That's why it's a paradox. If it was worse, because if it was worse, you'd make a decision, change your life, and your life would be better. So that situation is your boss comes in and punches you in the face or really bullies you or undermines you, and you go, do you know what, fuck this, I'm out of here. Your life is going to be better. And it was better because of a worse situation. And it goes back to that resilience. We're so good at just sucking that up for a long period of time. So it kind of speaks to what you were saying there as well. So the heart attack from a physical health point of view could be an emotional heart attack, a relationship heart attack, a job heart attack, something that's so big. But my question always was, how do we make this change without having to wait for a catastrophic event in our life? Yeah. And a lot of the other areas of our lives are enticing us to stay in this sedated, less than optimal space because we're better consumers then. Put on the tinfoil hat if you want, but we consume more, we eat more, we consume more content, we get addicted to porn, we get addicted to drink. We're just better consumers if we feel shitter about ourselves because we think all these different things. It's just a fact. It's a marketing fact. We feel all these different things are going to fill the hole in ourselves, so we consume more. So there's no real incentives for society as a whole to force change because it works on a financial level. So what the fuck are we doing here? But you mentioned reflection. I think that could be an effective way if you can have a good reflective piece. It could be meditation, it could be whatever, it could be accountability. But that potentially for me is a way to avoid having to have this fundamental dark night of the soul in order for you to start making positive change in your life. Where would you sit on this whole issue?
The first thing I'd say is that sometimes the heart attack isn't even enough to change. Like, look at George Best. He got a liver transplant and still kept drinking. So for some people, and that's addiction comes into play there as well. But even some of the research, when I see the research on people being accountable and adhering to their organ transplant medication, people can't even say accountable for that. I think it's like I forget the numbers. They're shocking. I think it's like 50% of people don't take the medication that helps with the organ transplant after they've had a transplant. Like, this is the key medication that will make the new organ work.
Oh, it's anti-rejection medication.
Anti-rejection medication, that's the word, yeah. So even the heart attack challenge can't always be enough to keep people accountable. But it's so difficult. And this is like, if you could break this space around like habit change and behaviour change, like you're changing the world, like you really are. But I think reflection is really key. The one thing that I always come back to, like, I think for some people that have massive changes, I think it's like, I'm going to say the word spiritual shift. It's a spiritual shift. And when I talk about spirituality, I think of spirituality, nothing to do with religion. It's more to do with energy, awareness, connection, I think keys into it as well. But when I had my shift in perspective, right, I knew heroin was bad to me. I had the knowledge. Of course heroin was bad to me. I knew that. But I wasn't aware. And people say, oh, well, you knew you were doing it. That's aware. That's not awareness. Awareness is something different. And I think it's really hard to label. It was like an aha moment. It was like the light bulb came on and I was like, what have I been doing? And that's real reflection. That's where you want to really wake up. My sense of self, my sense of who I was, my conceptual sense of me in the world was rocked to the core. And I think that's the real key of where we need to go. Your identity, who you think you are. And do you know what we're back to? We're back to pain. We're afraid of pain. And when we think of identity, of who we think we are, that's what the ego really is. So if you think, right, I was Brian, an anxious addict, as hard as that life was, my ego thought that was me as a human being. And if that was to die, I die. The ego dies. So the ego fears the death of the identity as the death of everything. So even very, very sick people sometimes are afraid of change getting better because their sense of who they are is dying. So I think we need to reflect, but it's got to be to a level. And that's why you need those really rock bottom moments to really shake you up so much that your identity is so rocked that you're willing to change. So how do we get that through reflection? It's really, really hard, but we need those light bulb moments where it's just like, oh, wow, now I really see what's going on. So it's very hard to label. It's very hard to put into words, but you've got to rock your identity, your soul, your core of who you are so much that you see it from a different perspective.
I'm going to go at you a little bit here. I'm going to dig a bit deeper. Your podcast is called Change is Possible.
Yeah.
Incredible, by the way. People should go and check it out.
Thank you.
And there's mad plans in the future. It's really exciting. But there's a phrase that I've heard many times before, is that change is not possible until the fear of, what is it? You know this, I've actually messed it up. Is the fear of change is greater than the fear of, the fear of greater the same is, let me start that over again. I'm not even going to edit it. I don't edit it. Change is not possible until the fear of staying the same is less than the fear of change. So that's probably not even the phrase. I'll find the actual phrase, but understand the concept.
Yeah.
Until the pain you have is so uncomfortable, the heart attack, you're not going to change.
Yeah.
For most people, your podcast is called Change is Possible for a reason, because people can change.
Yeah.
You know the topics, but right now, your felt sense, even if it's not specifically grounded in data, what is your felt sense outside of waiting for that catastrophic event to rock your world and then making changes after that? Because for a lot of people, that could be the deathbed thing. That could be
dead. Go.
Bollocks.
Yeah.
Fuck. Shit.
Yeah.
That regret. That's what I think most of us, that's what we fear at a core level, that regret of not having ever actually lived. So without having to wait for those moments, whether it's a heroin addiction in your younger years or a heart attack in your older years or on your deathbed, what have you seen? Because you believe change is possible. What's driving the belief for you? What are you seeing, and what's really helping inspire people to make those changes? I'm trying to get into the what here a little bit.
And I think, right, because there's multiple ways of doing this. Everything is so nuanced. Everything is so complicated. That's the thing. And everyone's journey is very, very different. And I'm nearly more in awe of people that create incredible change without having that big moment. And I see it again and again. And it's probably deep reflection. Maybe some people are born that way. Maybe some people just haven't had trauma. You see some people going on to achieve incredible things, but they had a really nice upbringing. So there's multiple different ways that people can change. It's a little bit more difficult. I think when we're talking about that big moment of change, when people are really, really stuck to have that change, that's when it can be really difficult, because you're swimming against the tide. And for some people in the world today, life is so busy that they haven't got time to reflect. But it could be therapy. It could be talking to a friend. It could be just another... I think you need to get curious. I think that's something that's really key. You need to get curious, and you need to create the space for that change. But if you get curious, and it could be talking to friends, talking to a therapist, listening to a podcast, reading books, meditation, breathwork techniques, or it could be just lighting a little spark. Like, I'll give you a sense of change for me, right? So I was so terrified from the trauma I experienced as a kid. So for anyone listening, I had an operation without a general anaesthetic, and I ended up with this deep phobic fear of my heartbeat, breath and pulse. I was terrified, and that was the core part of my anxiety. But one of the big changes for me, it was a real core change, is that I was introduced to mindfulness while I was in detox. And the mindfulness teacher says, focus on your breath. And I says, I can't focus on my breath. I'm terrified of my chest. I'll have a panic attack if I go there. And she said, well, just focus on the air coming in and out of your nostrils. And this might seem like very easy and normal to some people, but I remember focusing on the air coming in and out of my nostrils, the cold air going in, the hot air coming out, and I could hold it. I could hold the focus on my body for like 10, 15 seconds, and it was like a miracle. And that was a little baby step that started the journey of me befriending my body. Because when I talk about change and we say, yeah, change is possible, Brian changed, that's a very simplistic way of putting it. There was multiple different changes. Like, I now have a PhD in neuroscience. That took me like 10 years. Like, that was slow change over time. I now have beautiful connection and relationships in my life. That took hard work and change over time. I was 6 or 7 years in recovery before I could put my hand on my heart because of the trauma that I experienced. That took trauma work. That took body work. That took change over time. I did have a cataclysmic shift, if that's the right word, in terms of my self-talk. It was like my mind went quiet, and that probably allowed a space for other things to come in. But a lot of it was change over time. So it's really interesting. It does get very complicated. But what I would say is, like, for people, it's about sustaining the initial change, that first little step. So you've got to make a lifestyle change. So I think people try to aim too big. Like, we're looking for the big thing. That's what we do as humans. We look for the big thing, and we say, right, I want to become a runner. I want to become more self-aware. Well, how about starting small? I want to do a breath work for 1 minute every morning and stick to that 1 minute every morning. Get accountable for that. And that will compound over time and create the change over time. So there's multiple ways of doing it. But I think what the big challenge gives you, it gives you a drive to be more accountable and more determined and more disciplined. That's really what it gives you. Gives you more motivation, more drive to do that, more reason to do that. But there is other ways of doing it.
Throughout the course of doing this podcast, people provide puzzle pieces for me. And through conversations like this, they start to kind of come together. And this conversation particularly has been an underpinning theme from most conversations on and off the show I've had, really trying to nail down this question that we all have: is how do we make these changes? How do we stop telling ourselves certain stories? Like, how? And as you're explaining it there, the pieces are aligning even a little bit more for me. I have conversations all the time about this idea of space. And just very quick context for anyone who mightn't have heard me say this before a million times. This idea of space, I think it all starts with being able to create some space, because all of the things and the strategies you've outlined there, in my experience talking to people and my personal experience, are almost impossible if we don't have a really, really clear grasp on why we're doing it and who we want to become. Atomic Habits, James Clear spoke about this idea of identity, which you mentioned there. Don't be someone who goes to the gym. Become the type of person who wants to be fit. Yeah. So, and it's a subtle difference, but it's retweaking your identity. So in terms of a strategy, that's very, very effective. But before we even think about strategies, I always think about, if I don't know who I want to be or what I want my life to look like, no strategy will work, because every strategy is effective when it's applied in a certain direction. But if I don't know what the direction is, or where I want to eventually be, or what this idea of happy me is, then I'm not, like, no strategy will work, because nothing is specific to me. And you talked a couple of times about specific circumstances, specific traumas, specific environments. That's what's going to really dictate what works in a certain situation. So for me, being able to create space will do the very first step in this. And it's a piece of the puzzle I got a while ago. It'll start the wheels turning as to who do I want to be and what is happiness. Because for me, it's going to be different from you. Like, what is this idea of happiness? What is that? And I can't figure that out because I'm so busy and I'm stressed and my fear response is being activated and I'm being triggered and I've all these things. So I've no time to actually sit and think about. And I believe the reason we don't want to sit and think about it is because we're afraid of that shadow or that monster or that darkness or those thoughts or whatever it is that we want to call it. We're afraid to sit, because if we sit in silence and space, it's not just happy-go-lucky, feely thoughts are going to come in. You're going to have other thoughts that come in.
Yeah.
But I do believe if we're able to create some element of space, and what do I mean by space? It could be the walk. It could be the breath work. It could be just sitting staring at a wall. Pascal, what was his name? I used to quote this all the time, but most of man's problems stem from an inability to sit in the quiet by himself for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Blaise Pascal.
Yeah.
I do fundamentally believe that even though most people listening to us now have probably heard most of the strategies we're discussing and probably haven't succeeded with most of them, I'm gonna put that out there because I'm one of those people. Tried all the things, most of them didn't work. That didn't work for me. That didn't work for me. Didn't work for me. I think the reason none of these strategies necessarily worked was because I hadn't actually decided where I was trying to go yet. I just knew I wanted something to change. I didn't feel good right now. I wanted to do something different, and I was just replacing maybe my maladaptive behaviors with things I was told were good. Be really resilient, get up every morning and write in your journal, do breath work, go for a walk, go to the gym, take care of your body, and everything will be fine. There's a certain element of truth there. It'll round off some edges for you, for sure. It'll calm the nervous system, for sure. But until I started to actually just, one, have conversations and be vulnerable with people, create that space with another person, and two, be able to sit with myself a little bit, none of it made sense. As soon as I decided to do that, I was like, all these strategies start to make sense. None of these are never going to work for me, but this one's going to work.
Yeah.
And then I was able to take one action in one direction, but the direction was right for me. And I've started to feel like when you get a grasp of that, the strategies start to fall in for you. They start to work because you start to realize which ones are for you and which aren't. And you start to actually see that this has brought me a step closer to what I want. Personally, for me, it's peace. I want a sense of peace. I want a less busy mind. I want more connection with my family. That's what I want. And if this strategy brings me closer to that, I'm winning. Positive reinforcement, positive feedback loop. Okay, I'm closer to this thing. If I don't think about those things, I'm like, okay, well, I need more money and a bigger house and I need a faster car and I need more clients and it's all the noise and I never feel fulfilled and I always feel overwhelmed and none of these strategies work. Does that big rant make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And it's the space thing is really, really key because I'm always reflecting because I'm always I'd love to bottle up what happened to me and give it to other people. And I can't, obviously. But something you said about the space, and for some people, like you're saying, yeah, taking an hour or two here and there. But maybe the one thing that happened to me was all of a sudden I was at a detox facility and a treatment facility. I took weeks and it was months of space, and it took me time to really reflect on that stuff. And I think that's where people are so busy that they haven't got the time and they haven't got the space. So how do you create the change when you haven't got that space? That's the really hard thing, you know? So people are just going around putting out fires all the time. So I think that's the biggest challenge people have. So how do you create that space? And it's nearly like, I think the discipline piece is the key. And if you want to change, you've got to nearly enjoy it. Like, as he says, behaviour that's rewarded is repeated. That's just not for drugs. That's for everything else. I was highly rewarded by education and curiosity. So that's the path I went on. So I was very lucky to get this space in detox and treatment. Didn't feel lucky at the time when I was in detox and treatment. But I got space and it took me a few weeks. I said, maybe I can go to college. And all of a sudden, I enjoyed college. Behaviour that's rewarded is repeated. So it was more of an intrinsic motivation to go and do something good rather than bloody drugs, you know what I mean? So you've got to find something. Like, if you are going to try to create change and you're going against the grain and you're not enjoying what you're doing, it is not going to last. It is just not going to last. So whatever change and direction you're going in, creating the space is key. But whatever change you do try to decide to go in, you've got to find enjoyment in it somewhere. And this can be very difficult for people that are, let's say, depressed, for example. The essence of depression is you find joy in nothing. Now, obviously, you get into clinical psychology and you have to have help in other directions. But for somebody that's not like massively struggling in terms of psychological challenges, you've got to find the joy in something. You've got to find something that's going to light you up a little bit, and then the momentum of that can take it in that direction. So it's so complex.
Tricky, but and I just want to keep drilling into this because you mentioned at the start, you gave a really, really great explanation of why the brain responds in certain ways. If you are in this stress and fear response that we are chronically in at the moment, which you outlined physiologically that happens in so many of us all the time, it is going to be impossible to sit down and be with yourself and have these thoughts flow through. You are in a forced environment. You're in rehab. They don't let you have all of the distractions. They keep them away from you.
Took my phone off me.
They take everything away because they understand it's not just about detoxing from the substance. It's about detoxing from the triggers that cause you to reach for the substance. So in our world, where maybe we're not necessarily dealing with addiction, well, we all are. I'm going to ask you that in a minute, but we are all addicted to things, in my opinion. But if you are in this hyperactive, hyper engaged, stimulated nervous system all the time, even if you do sit down for 5 or 10 minutes or go for a walk, it's very unlikely the first thoughts that are going to come through your mind are, oh, this is what makes me happy. Oh, these are things, and you're going to get that intrinsic motivation. So I think as a practical starting point for people, there's going to be 60% of people who are listening going, none of this is connecting. The lads are talking shite, of course. But for the person, because this was me, every now and again, something just resonates. The starting point I found, my experience and the experience of other people I've spoken to, is nervous system regulation. Start there.
Start with the biology.
Get out of the burning building.
Yeah.
Start with the biology. The biology will facilitate the space.
Yeah.
If your nervous system is is more regulated, and you're in that kind of calmer space in general, you're going to find it a little bit less challenging. Notice I didn't say easier, but a little bit less challenging to create these minuscule pockets of space at the start. That's all it's going to be. It's going to be 1 minute in the kitchen where you didn't reach for your phone when you were having your dinner. 1 minute it's going to be at the start. Again, speaking from personal experience of people I've spoken to. But the more you're able to recognize and regulate the triggers and the red alert and the burning building stuff, the more you'll actually you'll see opportunities for space in your life where you can't even see them at the moment. Just like Jill said to me, I can't even see your positive facial expression when I'm stressed. I interpret it as angry. You could be smiling at me and I think, they're smiling, they're angry, there's something going on. If I'm not stressed, I see a smile. I just see a smile. Similarly, I believe if we can regulate our nervous systems in a practical way by not going into the burning building, by not putting yourself into those stressful situations all the time, by taking care of your body and of your mind and going for a walk and being in nature and maybe having a little rest and lying on the floor, doing some meditation or feeling your belly, whatever it takes for you, having a heavy blanket on you, having someone give you a hug, whatever helps bring you back probably should be the starting space. The starting point, because to try and think about this abstract idea of space when you are stressed to the absolute annoyance, literally impossible.
Yeah,
literally, you know this, I know this, everyone listening knows this, and that's why it's frustrating sometimes to listen to these things. Going, I can't do that. I propose that maybe the reason you can't do that in a lot of cases is because we're overstimulated. If we stop the overstimulation to a certain degree, I think we're going to see more opportunities for space. If we create space, we're going to just feel. You mentioned that little spark. That little bit of, oh, maybe I'd like to do this. Maybe I don't love my job. Maybe I'm not having a great time in my relationship at the moment. Oh, and that's that little spark of awareness. Maybe it's this thing me and you keep talking about that we're looking for. Like, how do we help people? Maybe that's how you find it. You regulate your nervous system. It creates a bit of space, and within that space somewhere there's a little spark. And then you fan that spark. And some people, the spark will go out and you go through the cycle again. But if you can fan that spark a little bit, for me, that was the positive reinforcement loop. I started to, you started to go, oh, I'm enjoying college. I'm enjoying learning. Yeah. For me, it was, I feel deeper connected with my kids. They're reacting to me differently here. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
You were noticing it.
I noticed it. And it's not because I had this mad awareness or anything. I had just a little bit less. I was a little bit less overstimulated, and I go back to those overstimulated moments all the time. But I always know, because either Jill will say something to me, or I'll notice how the kids are interacting with me. It's a big wow moment for me. Oh God, they're not interacting with me the same way. I must be. Oh, I am. I was on my phone a lot this morning. I'm sending emails. I'm thinking about work all weekend. And I know I have this little pattern, but it's so slow at the start. But again, I'm just trying to dig down to what is the first thing people can do.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's something I can't believe hasn't even come up in a conversation. It's the phones, like that. What's your relationship with your phone? So that's one of the biggest stimuli inducing things in your life. One of the biggest stressors in your life. Most people listening to this will probably be doing it through your phone, and I hate the phone because it's so damn bloody useful that it's hard to get rid of.
Don't put your phone down. Keep listening.
Yeah. But it's like, get the biology right first, and if you work on that first, and even just forget about the rest, you will find those little sparks just coming into your life, driving the car, in the shower. That's where I start to find those little moments. And they're moments when you're not.
You can't be on your phone, hopefully.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So that's really the key. But there's another element to that as well. Something that I just remembered, I forgot I do this. I do it every year. I have one organised now coming up. Every year I have like a life audit, an annual review. And it's a personal annual review. And I'm going to try to do actually two days this year. I hope Natalie doesn't listen to this. I have to tell her about what my plans are. But I want to do 2 days and really do a deep dive, and it'll be no phone. It will be going away. And I only heard recently Mo Salah does this. He goes away from his wife and his kids for 2 days every year, I think a day or something like that. And I know I have a mentor of mine that does it as well, because the answers won't come to you initially. And I know that's quite impossible for some people. Maybe I used to do it for 2 hours on New Year's Eve. And that was a real moment for me of doing that. On New Year's Eve, I have a reflection piece. And I've just a couple of questions that I ask myself. What has been working for me this year? What hasn't been working for me this year? Really overarching, big, open-ended questions. But give them a little bit of time. And if you look at those answers, right, well, certain toxic relationships, what was giving me energy this year? What was taking away me energy this year? You know, that way. And things like that can really help you to reflect on that. But I think, as you stated, Dan, there's no point in doing the likes of that. If you're fired up and your biology is ramped up and you're overstimulated, you've got to look after that first. The biology's got to come first.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, this could go back and forth all day. We'll get through one question. Shame. This just comes up for me, right? I hated, and still to a certain degree do, hated reviewing my life. Because there was elements of shame for me that I wasn't where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand this. And then I heard all this idea around shadow work and this kind of stuff. Call it what you want. These unconscious thoughts and stories that we hold deep inside that are the reason for most of us why we don't want to sit in space, or we don't want to reflect, or we don't want to do a life audit because I'm embarrassed and upset. There's a level of me and of everybody listening that knows there's certain elements of your life you're not satisfied with.
Yeah.
But to acknowledge it makes it real. So we don't acknowledge it. We drown it in insert substance or behaviour here. We just drown it. And for some people, they drown it in work, and they drown it in people, and they drown it in friends, but they're still drowning it. And for some people, they drown it in drinking, drugs and sex and rock and roll. But we drown it. So it took me a long time to, I hated Christmas. I love Christmas, but I hated New Year's. Because I'd look back and go, I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve this year. I'm not where I want to be in my life. I'm a terrible person. And I'd spiral down this. So I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Zero reflection, which led me to getting to a point of almost breaking. I talked about this before in my 30s, like, because I'd never ever sat down and done a reflection piece on myself. And I would hazard a guess, a lot of listeners, there's an element of, I don't want to sit and think about these things because I know I'm not going to be happy with some of the things that I find.
Yeah.
So that reflection piece, but back to what we just talked about. Most of the time I had those thoughts, I was probably in a stress state. So I observed or perceived threat where there was none. And then when I actually sat down and reflected, I was like, oh, that's not actually not bad.
Yes,
I've actually done quite well. I'm actually quite proud of myself. But I was in a much better state physically and biologically. I wasn't stressed out of my mind trying to sit down and reflect on my life because all I was seeing was shit. I was actually a little bit more regulated, a little bit calmer. I'd had a positive experience with someone helping me reflect before, so I just leaned a little bit into those. Didn't do a 2-day audit where I left the family like that.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, how did this year go? And you kind of almost like, how did this year go? Almost afraid to look, and they're like, oh, it actually went quite well.
Yeah.
It maybe didn't achieve these things, but overall it was really good. Made some new friends, had a great year with the kids, whatever. Like, so I think that could be a huge barrier for people.
Yeah.
I just think it's worth mentioning. For a lot of us, that reflection piece, that audit piece, it's not that it's just not easy. It's very difficult.
Very difficult.
Because stuff could come up, but I think our perception around that stuff might be inflated. So if we were doing some of the regulation pieces, maybe we'll find that reflection piece a bit easier. Just trying to think about horse and cart. Like, we want space to calm us a bit more, but we need to be calm to be able to harness the space.
And the irony is that the people that are willing to do the review are probably further along the path, you know, that way. So how do you get the people that are really overstimulated and get the biology first? But
were you doing a life audit when you were on heroin?
Certainly not.
Okay, so
certainly not. Yeah. It's only one question. Where's the next bag coming from?
And for like this, I was going to ask you this question. Do you believe we're all, not that we're all addicts, because that word has weight to it, right? It's a very important word. But do you believe we all are addicted to things? So this is my bag of heroin for some people. I'm putting my phone here, by the way, if you're not watching. So like that question, where's my next bag of heroin? Where's my next forget about my life right now moment come up from?
Yeah. Well, it's not. It even gets more darker than that as well. Like, some people are addicted to overthinking, and you could say, well, how do you get addicted to overthinking? Like, that isn't addictive. And like, let's go down to the definition of addiction. It's continued use of a behaviour despite harm to self or others.
Okay.
So if you're continually overthinking, you're kind of addicted to overthinking. And you say, well, why would you get addicted to that? Where's the good in that? Well, that's your body trying to scan for certainty, even though it doesn't exist. So you're worrying, projecting into a future that you're not going to get the answers to. But it's that projecting and that seeking, looking for control, that's addictive, that way. So you keep on going back and back and back. So that, even overthinking, anxiety is nearly addictive in a way, because the anxiety's fueling the anxiety. You're anxious about getting anxious. So you're nearly addicted to looking for the solution to not get anxious. But that's the worrying that causes the bloody anxiety.
Rumination.
It's rumination. It's a loop. Even you see so many people are addicted to like politics, talking about politics. Like I would even say, like some people are like addicted to, this could be even quite, what's the word? The word's lost me, but like talking about gas and stuff, some people get really addicted is the wrong word. They get obsessed, and they get obsessed with drugs. That's an addiction. So we're playing language games again. But if you're so obsessed with that, and what it is like, and this is one way of looking at it, like, is I imagine it's deeply hurting you. You're looking at these kids getting killed, and it's absolutely horrific. It's absolutely terrible what's going on. But if you're constantly looking at these reels and constantly just out there, and it's great the work that you're doing, but you'd have to sort of parse that down and say, right, well, what good am I actually doing? Am I actually helping? Am I just sort of causing problems myself? Is that problem leaking into my family? What other elements of my life? So we need to sort of create boundaries around this of how it's leaking into our lives. So you could nearly take anything in the world and nearly get addicted to it to a certain extent. So addiction, the poison can live in all different ways. There's loads of different poisons, but you need to look at the definition. What is the continued behaviour or use that is causing harm to self or others? You're continuing to do the drug or the behaviour despite those harms. And if there's something in your life that is continuous and causing problems, that's tapping into the addiction.
Yeah, it's this open loop thing as well, the Zeigarnik effect. Have you heard of the Zeigarnik effect? Yeah. The brain just hates these open loops.
Wants to close it.
The Zeigarnik effect, the example they always use is the waiter can remember your order until you've paid the bill, and then they forget everything you've said. They can remember 16 people sitting at a table, every drink order, every appetizer, where you're sitting, etc. And it's incredible. But as soon as the bill is paid, they forget all of it.
Yeah.
But because the loop has been closed, so the brain is obviously able to file that in a resolved.
Yeah.
We don't need to access this information. If you're opening, let's say, the average person might watch 1,000 reels a day. If you're potentially opening 1,000 loops every day that you physically cannot close for yourself, let's use conflicts abroad. Most people, it triggers a human response in most people. Most people don't want to see other people suffering. So the fundamental driver, let's be very clear on this, I'm not casting judgment on anybody who gets involved in these political or social things. I think it is important. And I understand why we're activated by them. Let's use activated rather than triggered. But you're opening thousands of loops every single day that you can have literally no impact on. And not only that, you're doing it through platforms that know this. And it's the driving force behind how they build their platforms. Yeah. So with that information that we have, my brain doesn't like all these open loops because it's stressful. And by the way, I think my theory, without knowing the neuroscience, my theory behind the waiter thing is when he's able to remember all these things, you're in like adrenaline mode, you're on, so you're sharp and you're dialed in, you can remember all the orders, you can see where the lion went into the bush, like you're like, he went in there, so he's going to come out here. But as soon as you're safe, you're like, what fucking bush was that?
Yeah. What use is the information?
What colour was the lion? What use? That's all gone. It's not useful, so get rid of it. But while you're in that mode, it's almost like you've engaged turbocharger, you're Vin Diesel burning the nitrous and the fucking Too Fast, Too Furious. That's a limited resource. And if you're constantly in that space, that's where this chronic stress response comes from, because you're on all the time, and now you're thinking about 17 different world conflicts plus the political situation in America, which is, we don't live in America, by the way, plus the conversations your boss had today, plus all of these made up stories that you have in your head about the world, plus your trauma, plus your experience, plus the environment, plus you just missed the bus, plus, and you've all of these open loops that you're supposed to be processing, and you do not give yourself 60 seconds in a day to sit down and allow them to work through and resolve them in your head. Not even think of the solution, but just allow the emotion to pass through and let it go.
Yeah.
You've got a million open loops. No wonder.
And you know what the thing is? Like, I think of just mental friction and psychological friction, because our brains are energy hungry machines. This is something, it's another, your starting question actually, what do most people not know about the brains? Our brains are energy hungry machines. The reason being, they take up 25% of the body's energy, but they only weigh 10% of the weight. So there's a huge mismatch there in terms of the weight versus the energy consumption. So it tries to be really, really strict on that energy. So closing a loop, forget about that. We're not going to need that information again. What it's saying is we don't need to create dendritic structures and neuroplastic changes, growth changes in the brain that take so much energy to remember that in the future is gone. But with this survival-based anxiety inducing reels and stuff like that, all of a sudden, all of these open loops, the energy is the friction's there. You're not closing any of the loops. It causes friction at a physiological level and a psychological and emotional level. And let's be clear here as well. Like, it's really important. We need people in the world doing these things. This is what can create change as well. But not looking at the 1,000 reels. It would be looking at something and maybe going and doing something about it. So I think it's taking positive action around it is key, rather than just sitting up half the night looking at all these reels and going to bed with it, you know, that way. So it's how you operate within that is key.
I think I want to be fair with these conversations. This whole issue probably needs another 5 hours to talk about. So I'll give my overview, right? And we won't go too deep into it. I think there's so much nuance into it. I make absolutely no qualms and have no reservations saying every single time someone asks me this question, 99% of what we see on these platforms is not true and is virtue signaling. So if you're involved in online arguments trying to fight your cause online, I understand that the causes are important. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the platform is not optimal for these conversations. Brezzy had a beautiful line that has been ringing in my dreams since he said it. The currency of social media is division. These platforms are not designed necessarily, maybe I'm wrong, by a big evil overlord who wants us all to die or fight each other or whatever. But us being distracted, us being controversial, us getting into debate is all a form of engagement. And these platforms run off engagement. They are designed to suck us in and keep us using the platform. So whether you want to believe it's evil overlords or it's basic biology and marketing, the outcome is the same. We are spending too much time on platforms that cause us to have physiological and biological reactions in our brains. And there's social dynamics. There's social virtue to be seen to be on side A or side B. There's social virtue to be seen to show the world how much you care without actually doing anything. But one thing it does do is it spreads more anger and it causes more frustration.
Polarized.
It polarizes people. Yeah. It makes you angry. It causes arguments with you and your friends and your family.
Yeah.
It raises important issues of what people say. But the most important issue realistically at the start of this whole thread is you and how you feel. Because if you're stressed and worked up and angry, you're not going to have an effective input on whatever the problem is. And you probably can't impact it too much. And that's not being negative about it. It's being realistic.
Yeah.
What's probably a much better place to start is regulating your own nervous system and then deciding, is this something I want to have an actual impact on, and then potentially taking an action there. But I think just my overview on the tool itself, really, really powerful tools and not designed for our well-being.
Yeah.
They're designed for engagement. And a byproduct of us engaging with these things too much is our well-being suffers.
Yeah.
You can't ignore those facts. So I think if we can start there and then you want to go on and have conversations on online platforms and stuff, fine, they're great tools for certain elements of that. But most of what most of us see, this is not just me, it's anger and vitriol and rage and division, and that is how these things are so powerful and how they grow.
And it just strikes me like, imagine Nelson Mandela got involved with social media reels and got angry and full of rage on the back of that. Like that's not how he's an example of someone that created incredible change, but it was through a sense of calm, it was through a sense of acceptance, it was through a sense of logic. Like, yeah. God, yeah.
But it's that fear state anyway. It's the same thing we're talking about the whole time, and this is a massive magnifier of that for me anyway. I'm gonna say for me, in my opinion, but for so many of us, it's a tool. We don't exist in this vacuum where life is just neutral, and we're just trying to navigate a neutral life, and we're trying to try things that we're actively bombarded every day by things that are going to put us into this less than ideal physiological state. We talked about open loops and stress response. Every day there's stuff that puts us in those spaces. So I think as a baseline, our understanding needs to be, we need to pull back out of these hyper aroused states then make some decisions about what
that's the starting point.
I think it's a starting point, yeah. God, I went off on the phone, the phone one there. You mentioned a really interesting phrase when you came into me earlier on. You're going to talk about the name of the book as well. And this was a concept I didn't know what the name was. I'm familiar with the term from other industries. And it was fascinating to hear you say to me exactly some of the thoughts that have been rattling around in my skull for so long. I work in this space, right? I work in the space I've just slammed, the content space, helping people tell stories, get messages out, build communities, doing podcasts, making content. An observation I've had over years of doing this and meeting many people is that when you have a message, it's very powerful and it draws a lot of people in. When you draw people in, you build an audience. When you build an audience, the dynamics shift and they change and you become part of something that's different than just going out and meeting somebody in the street and having an impact on their life. Now you're doing it for many people. And there's a scaling thing that goes here. None of these things are inherently negative or bad. But I've seen a really interesting phenomenon where that changes the dynamic between me, the consumer, and the person. It could be Brian Pennie. It could be, I mentioned Brezzy. It could be all these wonderful people doing amazing things. But the dynamic shifts now because now you're a public figure and there's a business model and there's incentives and there's books and there's talking and none of these are negative. But how have you experienced that? And would you tell us this lovely phrase that you encapsulated all of this in when you came in?
Yeah, so it wasn't me. It was a book.
Wasn't Brian, by the way.
It wasn't me.
It's a book you read.
This is a brilliant book. Lynn Ruan, who was on my podcast, actually put me onto this recently, and James Leonard, actually, from the two Norries, the two of them.
Very good.
Two people's opinions I rate highly, and both of them said it within a week and says, I need to get this book. The book by Darren McGeevy is called Trauma Industrial Complex. And what he's talking about is basically, and it's specific to trauma, so it's not exactly, it's close to what you're saying. So let's say somebody has experienced trauma. Many people in the wellness space have been through some adversity. They have a story, and that's why they got into the field. Even a lot of people in psychology and psychotherapy have struggled in some way with anxiety and stuff like that, and that's why they got into the space. But let's say for people specifically to talk about their story and a story of trauma, and he really captures it in the book brilliantly because this is not what people used to do. And Eminem, of all people, is a great example of this. He became the biggest artist in the world basically by using rap to talk about his trauma with his man being an alcoholic and an addict and all these crazy stuff happening in his life. People could relate to that. Young people could relate to that and bought into it. And we've been telling stories for millennia, we're hardwired for stories. So people out there who've experienced trauma go out and tell their story. They get this validation. All of a sudden, for some people, it turns into a business. And then they have this narrative that is making money. And then their livelihood could depend on that. And mine is like that as well. But what Darren McGeevy says in this book is that some people still have, and he's an example of this, he says, of this unprocessed trauma. And for people that have unprocessed trauma and pain, this social validation is a monster, this huge thing. So they're getting money, they're getting social praise, but they're getting it for telling this really raw story. So sometimes the raw story could even shift for some people, or they create a narrative and bend it a little bit. And I've been thinking, I've told my story so many times that have I bent elements of that? Because I know from neuroscience and from psychology that our brains are not really good at remembering. We think we remember things, but we bend things. And I wrote the book, and there was some things I couldn't remember about my life, so I talked to other people. What was their memory like on that? So the narrative just gets shaped in a certain way, but then your livelihood depends on it. And for people that have unprocessed trauma that are still struggling, God knows the lengths that some of these people may go to, but then all of a sudden they're left raw. And if that validation goes away, they no longer have the validation. They still have the trauma. Maybe the business model is gone because no one wants to buy their story anymore, or they haven't created good business from that. So they're left even in a worse place. So I think it can be really, really challenging, really, really challenging for people. But then back to your question specifically, what was the question? So aligned with that. What was your question?
Let me give some context, right? To be fair, because none of the things that you've said there, I have a problem with at all. I have zero problem with any of that. I had a conversation on the last episode of the podcast with Owen Lacey. My background is medical. We specifically spoke about this from a medical perspective, and my motivation here is to try and help us mere mortals on the consumption side understand how to effectively interface with the information that we're getting. And just to dig a little bit deeper into that, from a medical perspective, there's so much information out there from so many different people. Yeah. I think it's important to understand, not to mistrust to develop the sense of like mistrust that everyone's out to get you. Absolutely not. But to understand that there are different incentive models out there and they're not all revolving around you. So just because somebody is selling you a service or you read their book or they're saying something to you or they're offering you a medical option, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the only thing you could do. So the advice from Owen and what I would definitely lean into this model is just be a little bit more, not critical, but a little more curious.
Skeptical even.
Healthy skepticism.
Healthy skepticism.
Yeah. I agree with you. I agree with the words.
Yeah.
Just they have different meanings for different people. But healthy skepticism for me doesn't mean you question absolutely everything everybody says to you. But it does mean you're a little bit more curious about how you can take an active role in insert thing here. My healthcare. In this case, in my trauma recovery or my addiction or my relationship advice. A little bit more of an active role. I say this from personal, again, and professional experience, worked in the medical industry for ages, and the people with the best outcomes that I observed were people who wanted to be involved in the process and came in and were like, okay, doctor, but why did you say this? Have you heard of this? Could we try this? Is this a good option? And I know from working in the content space that doesn't drive clicks. So we just need to understand that. So my mission here, and to try and frame this as a question that you can actually answer, my mission here is not to say, all these people doing these terrible things. Everyone should do what they need to do. That's fine. But for me, the consumer, I want to understand that loads of people are saying loads of things. I want to get a feel for something that fits right for me and try it in a safe and healthy environment. And I don't have to be really tribal and get involved in this conversation about he's right and he's wrong and she's only doing this for money and he's only doing it. I don't have to even get involved in that. But if I understand that there's a deeper layer to all of this information, I can just get a bit better for myself at finding the stuff that works. That's my motivation here. It's not to try and point fingers at people.
And
there's no question, by the way.
Yeah, no, but I love it. It's framed it beautifully. And one thing I'd say about skepticism, because in normal discourse, being a skeptic is nearly seen as a bad thing. But if you want to be a great scientist, you need to be a great skeptic. Like the essence of powerful science is falsification. You got the falsified theories. You are an ultimate skeptic. That is wrong, and I'm going to prove it. When it passes the test, then it's robust science. Then it becomes a thing, a real thing in life. So that's what made Einstein brilliant. He had these falsifiable theories where he was proved right on the back of that. So what I would say then for, let's say, normal lay people looking at all this work, we've got to be aware of, right, be a skeptic, or use the language, really say, right, well, how might that not work for me, or how might that be wrong? But you've got to realise that all of these people out there that are delivering programs, and let's say people with lived experiences that are saying, oh, breath work is great, like myself, I say exercise is great. I come with a bias. I come with a monstrous bias. This worked for me. And when we think of robust science, the reason why we have a randomized control trial is to reduce bias. The best randomized control trial is a double-blind randomized control trial. That means that the scientist delivering it doesn't know who got the treatment and the person doesn't know who got the treatment, because bias is so powerful. And then you have the placebo effect kicking in as well. So there's so many variables that come into play. So be very skeptical. I'm going to use the word skeptical. Be very skeptical of what people are saying, and especially, I'm not saying especially if it's a lived experience, because I think in the trauma industrial complex that we see people nowadays that have a lived experience, and we put them up on a pedestal and say, no, they have a lived experience. That's really real, and that's really, really important. But their lived experience tends to be not grounded in science and knowledge, but they're even biased as well. So what I would say is for people, there is the only absolute is that absolutely nothing works for everybody. Like it just doesn't. And I think we had that conversation, different things, try out different things, see what works for you and double down on that. So, and again, it's not consume all this knowledge, action it, apply it. Look at the results, see what works for you. So loads of people have these things out there, try it out, see what works for you, because nobody has all of the knowledge, and certainly nobody has what's going to work for you. So it's about trial and testing, and I think that is the key metric. And but we're back to science again. It's trial and testing, it's experimentation. We've got to be like little scientists and experiment what works for us, and that's going to be your truth for you.
Yeah. Owen said pretty much the exact same thing from a hard health perspective.
Yeah.
And his kind of caveat to it was, look at the potential negative outcomes. If they're quite serious, think a little bit harder, ask a little bit more, go a little bit deeper. If the potential negative consequences of trying something or taking an action are not really deep and dire, try it out, test it, be your own little scientist, etc. But don't be afraid to ask for help when you're looking for verified sources. Like I said to him, Owen, to be honest with you, I'm interested in this stuff. I'm never reading a study. Like I'm not going to do it. And even if I do, I'm not going to read it right. And I read studies in college. I'm not going to do it right. Even if I had the interest, which I don't, I'm not going to read it. So to expect...
It takes hours to read a study.
No one's going to do it. And studies, and everyone has this kind of mistrust around studies now because a lot of them can be manipulated. A lot of them are poorly designed. A lot of them are biased and paid for and stuff like that. There's so much nuance to... So for that reason, people, even if they did read it, are probably not even going to get much out of it. But the advice generally seems to be with people who I would respect, like yourself and voices like Owen, is the same thing I would have a felt sense of, is just take a bit more of an active role, be a bit more curious, do a little bit of research. And there is an element of trust as well. You're going to have to get a feeling for, do you trust do you trust where the information is coming from? Most people are not trying to pull a fast one. I just have to say that, because maybe it sounds sometimes like I'm saying everyone's out to get you. I don't believe most people are trying to pull a fast one. I just think that if you live in a way that you assume everybody has your best interests at mind, number one, they don't know who you are. So they can't possibly have your best interests at heart, because you're going to be unique and different, and you're going to need different things, and you have a different background. So it's almost impossible for someone to know, unless they work with you directly one-to-one, how to help you. They can give you general guidelines like we're doing right now. I don't know who's listening. And then number two, they have their own incentives. And those incentives could be business, which I don't have a problem with. I run a business too. Yeah. But for me to understand that when I engage with somebody's business, there's multiple things going on here. They provide a service, and I can engage with the service if I think it's going to help me. But they need to make money as well.
Yeah.
Because they have to feed their family and they have to grow. And there's an element of greed and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But I just think it's empowering more than disempowering to be curious.
Yeah, you know, it's something that's jumping out at me, and I was only thinking of this yesterday, and I've thought about it before, but I haven't done a really deep dive on the thinking process. So one thing I would say as well, if you value certain people and their opinions align, so I'd be a big fan of Peter Attia's work. He seems to be a highly robust scientist. Mark Hyman will be another one, highly robust scientist as well, it appears. So I'm going to question this whole thing now as well, right? Because I seen something with Mark Hyman there the other day, and I actually downloaded, it was an article on the dangers of moderate drinking. Like, it's so bad for dementia. It's off the charts. Brand new study just off the blocks.
Moderate drinking as in not going mad hell for that.
Just moderate drinking. It's so bad. It's neurotoxic. Like even one drink, it's actually toxic for your brain. It's not going to kill millions of brain cells, but it is actually neurotoxic, which means brain cells will die. So Mark Hyman put this thing up on social media, huge traction. He put a link to the actual post, and I says, right, I trust him. Says he must have read the study. So I was going to post the same thing and I downloaded the study, and I was looking at it. I said, it's going to take me hours. I just haven't got the time. I'm going to trust Mark Hyman. But imagine Mark Hyman done that with someone else, and that someone else done that with someone else, and that someone else done that with someone else, because we're all scarce with time these days. So many people are scarce with time. So maybe it's coming from an initial trusted source, but they had an off day and they trusted someone that wasn't. And it just gets like Chinese whispers of disinformation. So it's difficult in a way, because the only way to really go back and get the information is to read the article, and then you need to know methods and statistical analysis to really get into the weeds with that. But I do think we need to be, again, quite skeptical of the information we're reading. But what I would say at the end of that would be, there's certain people, scientists out there, that I kind of trust their opinion, and if they are all aligned, I'm reducing the liability that potentially they all are doing that. So you're coming back to something that's sourced, and you're sort of trusting these people, you know?
Yeah, it's a great point. It is a great point. It is about being open and looking at a broad picture of the conversation, and then taking from that conversation either common themes that you see or things that you feel might be appropriate for your specific situation and your specific circumstance. Now, even to do that is quite difficult. So I'm not expecting people to have 19 tabs open to be cross-referenced. Oh, that would cheat ChatGPT now. You basically can do that. But yeah, and I just want to reiterate again, for me, it's a really positive thing, because sometimes I'm listening back to myself going, that's not how I meant to say that at all. It's just fucking slamming everything and everybody
today. It's impossible. Life is impossible.
Everything is shit. Don't bother. Watch Homer Simpson's one. Can't win, don't try.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the opposite. Like, it's this knowledge is power, and it doesn't have to be complex, deep scientific knowledge. And also, you just mentioned a point on trusted sources. I've started doing this quite a lot lately. There's loads of sources that I really genuinely trust, and probably if they gave me something, I wouldn't even check up on it.
Yeah.
What I've just started to do now is just go, okay, if I believe one thing that this person says, I don't have to believe all the things.
Yeah.
I could just take the stuff that feels right to me.
Yeah.
It's non-scientific, but like, I am the best expert on me. So this goes from my doctor, for the content I consume, for everything. I can listen to everything that everybody has to say, and then I could just make a decision on what feels right for me, and what have I heard before, and what have certain people that I really trust verified for me, and what have other people said. And there's loads of different filters you can kind of build for yourself. What does my partner think about it? And then understand that all of those people, including myself, have a bias. And after all of that, what comes up for me? Okay, this thing actually feels quite good. Because generally our gut feeling is quite accurate. Like,
Big time. And I think, and you know what it comes back to again? It's getting your biology right. Because if you get your biology right, you start looking after the head then as well. Like it's the biology first, then the head sort of looks after itself, especially in that quiet space. And then you start really getting more in tune with your instinct and your gut feeling. And I don't think you can go much wrong. Now, don't be following your gut if you're sort of all over the place, because it's probably not your gut.
It's a fear response.
It's a fear response. It's something else you're looking to. So do what feels right to you. I think that's really, really crucial. Don't discount that information.
I love when things accidentally circle back to points we've already made. And just reinforce. We didn't plan that now, but yeah, it's great. Like if you're trying to interpret all this information, even, and again, I just want to be a bit softer with the stuff I mentioned on the conflicts and stuff like that. We're interpreting them through a fear filter, so it's obvious we're going to have a response to it. We're human beings. We care. We're going to have an emotional response to these things. That's normal. I'm not trying to condemn that, but if we're a little bit more regulated. Do you ever notice the people who you meet who are the most regulated, they don't consume all this stuff, but they're truly compassionate and caring people. So they're not consuming because they don't give a shit about the world, which is it's the pushback I always hear on. Well, you don't obviously don't give a fuck if you're not looking up all these conflicts every day.
Yeah.
That's absolutely not true. Most people I meet who are in that calm space, they're so caring and compassionate. And they understand that the truth is not outsourcing all this angst and outrage. It's dealing with it internally, processing it, and then being able to actually reach out and help and touch other people. That's an understanding. You meet people that have a knowing.
Yeah.
You're like, I've met a few people like that in my life. I'm like, they're not the type of people to be on social media, consuming, constantly reading the news, etc. They're informed.
Yeah.
But they're truly compassionate, connected people. And I think they're the people who have a massive ripple effect and impact when you come across them. They've had an impact on me, directly and indirectly. But I think you made the point there, back to biology. Because even if you are listening to me say, you should build a filter and do all these different things, that's going to sound overwhelming as well. But if you're in that little bit state of calm, if your nervous system is regulated, you're probably going to find that a bit easier to do naturally.
Yeah.
Probably get a good sense of someone when they say something to you like, I could leave that, or I could take that. Yeah, that's probably good for me. It's probably not.
It's a skill as well, listening to your gut, your instinct. Yeah.
Go on, elaborate on that.
Well, it's just something that, and that's back to feel for me. Actually, I'm actually talking about the art of building a skill to feel intuition. I'm talking about that as a feel in itself, but it's something I was so disconnected. Like trauma, numbed the trauma, I numbed everything, and like when I found recovery, it took me a long, long time to reconnect with. To feel proper connection with other people. But I had to reconnect with myself first. And I'd say it's only done in the last 3 or 4 years that I'm really saying, recognizing what's a gut instinct, recognizing a feeling. I get like when I meet certain people, I get like it's a sense, be careful. It's just like a little, it's not linguistic. It's just be careful there. It's like spidey tingle senses or whatever you'd say. You know the way, I'll be careful there. That could be a little bit dodgy. That feels right. Right, that's a bit scary, but do it anyway. It aligns with who you are. Like I often think your values align with that. They can give you an alignment of what's important to you. But I do think it's a skill in terms of getting your biology right, so you can listen to it. But the more you listen to it and the more you trust it and the more you guide you, I think the louder that voice gets, that instinct voice.
Yeah, so it's a practice. It's a
practice.
It's an active, which is great because it's something, it's not abstract.
Yeah.
You can do this.
You can do it.
You can set aside time like you do for your training and for your meal prep and for whatever else it is you do, or for your accounts every year. Yeah. And you can practice this stuff.
You need space for it as well, though. We're back to that space, and there's not much space in the world. That's the problem.
Yeah. So I like, again, it's a hard thing. It sounds preachy when you say this, but like we all have 24 hours in a day. If you do want to, and this is back to the question, how do we have change? If change is something you want, is the precursor. If change is something you want, if you get a sense that you're not happy with something, I think this has to be something you consciously build in. And it might have to be at the cost of something else. Yeah. And maybe that's Netflix, and maybe it's going out with your friends.
4 hours a day screen time.
But this is why I'm trying to be soft around this now, Brian. But there's probably in most of our lives space for implementing something like this, a little bit of self-regulation, a little bit of self-care, a little bit of space. It's there for most. I know it's there for me. I know I was like, I've no time to do this. Jesus Christ, have I got time to do this? When I sat down and thought about it, I was like, fuck me, okay.
Do the maths.
But you have to want it, which comes back to, it's a catch-22, which comes first. You have to feel that little spark, and then you fan the spark. It's easy to create space and do these things. I met Adam Starr recently. I've talked about him loads of times, and I've mentioned him to you. He's a Buddhist meditation teacher. Had him on the podcast twice. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it.
Right.
Love Adam. Love Adam. He's one of those people I mentioned earlier on. You're in his presence, you feel it. But he gave me, really interestingly, very little pointers. I struggled with meditation. He told me about focusing on the breath in my nostrils specifically, because I was trying to make meditation a real active process. I was doing breath work, and he's like, no. You're not doing breath work. Yeah. You're just observing and being in the body. I was like, I don't know what that means or how to do that. And he was like, okay, well, let's do something practical. Just focus on the air coming in and out of your nostrils. I crave I used to be able to do 1 or 2 minutes at a time. I crave my 10, 15 minute meditation. It's only 2 or 3 weeks. I crave it now.
Wow.
Because it gives me more of that space, and it's the flame, and I feel like I can fan it more. So finding little bits like that is a chicken or egg. Do you down-regulate the biology? That helps you find the space. Finding the space helps you find more pockets in your life where you can down-regulate your biology, and all of a sudden you create this positive spiral. Because I think life happens in spirals, really. Yeah. You're either making positive moves, or you're making moves that maybe are not so positive.
Yeah.
And these spirals, I find, can be positive. But that starting point seems to be find the space, but then regulate the biology to find the space. And then if you then regulate the biology, you'll find the space, which means you've more space to then regulate the biology. Yeah, you're doing it right now with the big breaths. Yeah.
I am. It's so tough for people, isn't it? It's a tough world we're living in right now.
Yeah.
It's a tough world, and it's like, what comes first? So how can people make that first step?
Yeah. I don't give a voice, but I think we've covered it. I think it's the regulation piece. I think it's you mentioned the biology piece. I love the information you provided today, but like all podcasts, it's only information until you take action on it.
Knowledge is not where the game is played.
Knowledge.
It's all about the action.
It's not where the game is played. Brian, I have 50 other things on the list here, but we will not get through them today. So I think an hour and a half, I think it's good going. Would you do a part 2 of me?
I would definitely do a part 2. This was just great.
I didn't frighten you too much today.
No, not at all. Love this stuff. And you know what? This is creating the space, having conversations like this. So it's actually a privilege. I said at the start, it was a privilege. I was really, because we've had some great conversations after we do podcasts, and I was actually really looking forward to sitting down with this, but we create a space today. I'll be processing this information. I'll be taking this information going forward. So even podcasts can really help you, can be a catalyst for that stuff.
This was a full-blown cheat code for me. Full-blown cheat code. The time in my life when I started to actually start to think about things, think about myself, and was the time I did the podcast.
Yeah.
It forced me to be to think about the things I was saying and to reflect on how I even said there, like I wanted to even change some of the language. I said something, I didn't intend it to sound a certain way because it's going to be now you can overthink this stuff. But it forced me to start thinking a little bit, and then I realized, all we're doing here is creating some space. We're not on our phones. Yeah. Apart from the fire alarm, there's no distractions. We're in a room together where we're making eye contact. We're talking about topics. We're thinking deeply. We're forcing ourselves to actually think about our responses. It's not how are you doing, bro? Yeah, Greta's great, isn't it? Yeah. They're unconscious responses. We're forcing each other to actually think about things. You've said a few things today. I'm like, I got to use my brain here now and actually have to think about this because it's not just a natural response. Yeah. It's space.
I've talked about things today that I don't think I've talked about before. Yeah.
That's my mission achieved anyway, Mr. Pennie, tell us, what's next? Where can people find you?
God, I always say the big project for me at the moment is the work I'm doing with you, Dan. I'm loving the podcast at the moment. So it's been some really cool stuff going on. But I think if anyone does want to find anything, I always say go to the website. Everything's on the website. Getting the podcast up there, because I only recently released the podcast. That's going to be there soon. But what I will say to people as well, if you're struggling, if whatever is going on, there's a space on my website where I deliver online courses. If you put in the word resilience, which is an interesting topic we're talking about today, I didn't want to put beyond resilience, would have been too complicated. But put in the word resilience, get free access to all of those online courses, just for people to give them a little bit of a nudge in a certain direction as well. But all of the work I do, you'll find me there. I'll be on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. So
amazing. And that free resource, stuff like that can be so powerful for people. It can just be the start of that uncovering, the start of that space of finding the little spark.
The first little domino that can knock down other dominoes. That's what we're looking for.
100%. That's all we're looking for. And just tell us a little bit about the podcast. What's the mission with the podcast?
So the mission with the podcast is really just to spark seeds of change, like what we're talking about today. Like, I think that there's a couple of pieces as well. Like, it's accountability is really key in terms of the long-term change. But what's the starting point? And I think something that I like to do is, it sounds a bit like blowing smoke up my own ass, but it's like to inspire people in a certain way. Which the podcast is through conversations with other people to show their journeys of change. To talk about my journey of change as well, but the podcast is more about other people's journey of change to show other people that it can be done and ways to do it.
Amazing. And I sit in the room when you're recording it. The conversations, they're really, really good.
Cheers, man.
Really good. And I love despite the fact that maybe I sounded I wasn't being negative in the podcast today, Change is Possible is the name of the podcast. It's in the title.
It's not easy, but it's possible.
It's absolutely possible.
Yeah.
For the vast majority of people, it is absolutely possible. And it's in our control, and we can do any combination of these things and start to see results for ourselves. So if you want to change anything, it doesn't have to be catastrophic. Maybe you are in a really bad place, maybe you're not. But if you want to change something, we can do it. We can do it.
Yeah.
It is possible. Yeah.
It's possible.
I love that. I'm going to do one last thing before we go, because it's really annoying me that I got that fucking quote wrong. I'm going to ask Google here. I'm just going to say it. What's the quote about nobody will change until the fear of change is less than the fear of staying the same? The quote is, change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. I wasn't too far off.
Oh,
it's Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins.
Big T.
He comes up with some crackers. He really
There's some
does.
crackers.
Yeah,
I
love
love
him, I hate him. It was a lot of
He
crackers.
gives you a lot of crackers.
Yeah.
I'm a devil for a good quote. But yeah, change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. But based off our conversation, you don't have to wait for that. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.
Yeah.
But I don't know if
You don't have to. I nearly love the simplicity of the addiction one. Like when you're feeling sick and I'm at the losing this.
When you're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
You're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. That's when change happens.
Yeah. Amazing. Brian, you're an absolute gent. Really enjoyed that today.
Same, Dan.
Thank you for your
you.
time.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We'll see you soon. My friends, thank you so much for listening to that episode. If you are enjoying these conversations, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. It really makes a massive difference. Whatever platform you are currently listening on, whether it's Spotify or Apple or something else, please do subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And feel free to leave us a rating, a review to let us know your thoughts about the episodes, about the show in general, and to let us know if we're doing a good job and if you like what we're doing. Really, really appreciate it as always, and I will see you in the next episode.